Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Lucy and I share videos on the topic of long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome and mind-body approaches that can be used to help those conditions and other mind-body conditions. I also offer coaching to people who are interested in getting some support applying this approach to themselves and their own recovery. So today's video, I wanted to talk about Dr. Howard Schubiner's 5 Fs. The point of reviewing these 5 Fs is to make sure you're managing well with these, I suppose you could call them traps that we might get into when following a mind-body approach. And I think some of the reasons that we can get into these traps are also related to our personality traits that might be just natural tendencies that we have already. So it can be really helpful to review and even keep track of how you're doing with these things, just because it is so easy to fall into these traps in one way or another when you are trying to recover using a mind-body approach. And what I share in this video is not medical or mental health advice. It's information based on my reading around a mind-body approach and also my experience applying the approach to myself. So the first one is fear. And this is something I already talk a lot about on my channel, but fear is really important to manage because it keeps the cycle going where our nervous system feels dysregulated, we feel unsafe in our situation, and it's very natural to feel fearful about symptoms, especially because in the past or even in the present, they might have really serious consequences for you, like not being able to work, like depending on others to help you with your basic needs. Also, not knowing how long this is going to last for. A lot of these conditions, people are aware of other people who have had these symptoms for many, many years and they get concerned that that will be them too. But managing fear is so important because it's a cycle that we get stuck into and it fuels our symptoms, it fuels our nervous system being dysregulated. So this is a really good use of your energy and time to work on managing fear. It's important not to just ignore or push away fear. I think it is helpful to notice the part of you that is experiencing the fear, understand where that's coming from, express a sense of self-compassion towards that fear. In my experience, that helps me more with the fear reducing than if I was to just tell myself, oh, don't be fearful. I think often we know it doesn't help to be fearful. So it's really about what can we do that's effective to reduce the fear. Some people find journaling helpful, or even really allowing themselves to feel the fear over a period of 10 or 15 minutes and write down all of their concerns, all of their worries, just to allow themselves express it. And then after that 10 or 15 minutes to move on with their day. Different things will help different people. So this isn't specific advice, it's just ideas based on what I've found helpful. So the second F is focus. And often when you have chronic symptoms like pain, fatigue, headaches, migraines, dizziness, orthostatic intolerance, or whatever else, there's many uncomfortable, unpleasant symptoms that we could have. They naturally make us focus on them because it is so uncomfortable. It's so hard not to pay attention to that symptom. But the problem is the more we focus on it, often the bigger the feeling gets, especially if our thoughts at the time are negative or are helpless thoughts of, I don't know what to do, I need to get rid of this, I feel stuck, I'm not able to control this situation. So if we're focusing a lot on symptoms, it can make them worse and more intense. And in Dr. Howard Schubiner's book, Unlearn Your Pain, he talks about an experiment where people with chronic pain were asked to keep a symptom diary or record about when their symptoms were worse and better, specifically around their chronic pain. And they compared this group of people to a group of people who were not recording or focusing on their pain and symptoms. And the group that were recording actually reported higher levels and increased levels of pain after doing that exercise. And I suppose recording symptoms, there's different ways of doing it. And sometimes if you're thinking about how symptoms might relate to emotions and noticing that, that's different to recording symptoms and measuring their intensity many times a day. But this shows that the more we focus, the more our attention goes on something, the symptom can actually feel more intense and feel worse. And as hard as it is, it can be helpful to try and put your focus elsewhere. So still do your mind-body exercises that might be helpful, but think about what you would do if you didn't have those chronic symptoms. And are there some things that you can start to do that just take your mind off it altogether, so that you can start living your life again? This is really good for giving your body the message that it is safe. So the third F is fix. And many people will relate to being in a fix-it mentality when they've had chronic symptoms. And often it starts off with their research on what the cause of the symptoms is in the first place and what sort of treatment will help them. And often because people go to many doctors and they don't find a helpful solution or treatment through doctors, they're left on their own to try and fix this themselves. So it is really natural that you would develop a focus around fixing your symptoms. And especially because they're uncomfortable and you do want them to go away. But the problem with trying to fix symptoms is that it's subconsciously telling us that there is a need to fix something, that something is wrong. And that is not a message of safety. That is telling our bodies that we are not okay and that something needs to change. Also, often fixing in itself involves looking for answers outside of us. So I think it can be a problem when we're looking for answers outside of us, especially if you're trying to follow a mind-body approach, because often the answers are given when we do the self-reflection. But also sometimes we can bring this fix-it mentality into the work that we're doing, where we start to question how well we're doing. Did we do the right exercise at the right time? We've tried 2 or 3 different exercises and the symptom is still there. So what can I do now to get rid of it? It's this wanting the symptom to go away. And it's so easy to fall into doing that. But it's really helpful if you can be aware that you're doing it and try to shift away from being in a fix-it mindset. It involves having a level of acceptance about what is going on right now. And I think it's easier to have that acceptance when you know you're doing your best with following a mind-body approach and when you feel confident in what you're doing. Naturally, it is going to be harder to do this if you feel like you're not quite sure if you're doing the right thing. So I think this is where it can be also helpful to get support if you feel like you're not managing well on your own, because it can be easy to start over-analysing when we're not sure if we're doing the right thing at the right time or using the right tools in the right ways. So the 4th F is frustration. And it's so easy to get frustrated with having chronic symptoms because you may have experienced them for many years. You may have tried hundreds of different things to get rid of them or to manage or to fix. And naturally that causes frustration. And I think it's important not to deny these feelings. So if a part of you feels frustrated, acknowledging that a part of you feels frustrated, allowing that part to feel frustrated, or to spend some time writing about the frustration, or expressing it or experiencing it in some way. And just even sometimes by noticing and recognizing that a part of you is really frustrated, it can ease frustration. But it is helpful to do something to manage the frustration if this is an ongoing feeling that you have day after day and that's pretty persistent. Often we get frustrated when we don't accept the situation we're in. And of course it's hard to accept a really difficult situation, but the frustration itself and the lack of acceptance can mean that we are not in a good state for our nervous system to relax and in a good state to feel at ease doing other things and starting to live our life again in the way that we want to. And often these 5 F's are connected. So we get frustrated when we're focusing on symptoms, when we're trying to fix symptoms because that's maybe not going well, or it's proving difficult, and we get into this cycle where they're all impacting one another. So finally, the 5th one is fight. It's natural to want to battle your situation and battle your life and try your best. And I think for people who are achievers and are used to doing really well at just pushing through a situation and getting through it and being determined, sometimes they have an attitude of, I can battle this to get better and I will win. But I think sometimes that means that we can lack a sense of self-compassion and a sense of curiosity about why are the symptoms there in the first place? Is there a message that might be helpful for us to pay attention to? It can also be harder to notice emotions coming up when we're in a fight state, or when we're feeling frustrated or anxious, because sometimes we need a certain level of safety in our body for an emotion to appear. And if we are in a state of fight and flight, or frustration, or non-acceptance, sometimes it's just less likely that an emotion will come up. In IFS, they talk about the self energy, which is a grounded, accepting, curious, calm, creative, connected energy. That's a helpful state to be in when you're trying to get to know other parts of you. And sometimes parts don't open up if you are not in that state. If you are coming from a state of feeling angry or wanting to fight something or frustrated, then there's less likelihood that another part's going to want to engage or give you answers or be open. So noticing these states is helpful as well if you're using parts work as part of your recovery. So if you're going through a challenge in your recovery and you're not quite sure where you're getting stuck or what's going wrong, it can be really helpful to review these 5 F's and just consider, on a scale of 0 to 10, how well are you managing each of these. And again, remembering that we're not trying to deny feelings of frustration or fear or anger, that it's helpful to acknowledge those feelings, and actually acknowledging them often helps with reducing them. So it can just be helpful to think, could one or more of these F's be keeping me stuck? Could it be helpful for me to think of ways to manage differently and make sure that I'm not falling into these traps? I'd really recommend Dr. Howard Schubiner's book, Unlearn Your Pain. He also has another book called Unlearn Your Anxiety and Depression, which I think is good for people who notice that that's a big part of their challenge as well. Managing all of these things is easier said than done, and I think it's really natural to notice yourself experiencing any of these challenges. So, don't beat yourself up if you notice that these F's are challenging and something that you're struggling with. I think anyone in a situation with chronic symptoms would struggle with these aspects. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. If you feel like you would benefit from support, feel free to get in touch with me through the links that are in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.